Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really opening up an incredible, pretty diverse stack of source material. We've got everything from the greatest Roman rhetoricians, Plato, Cicero, Quintilian, right, alongside modern thinkers on personal effectiveness like Covey and Robbins.
And then anchored by these incredibly powerful voices from public discourse, figures like Sojourner Truth, Malcolm X, J.K. Rowling even. It's quite the mix.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our mission, I guess, for this deep dive is to try and distill the principles that seem to endure, the ones that are necessary for real influence, and maybe for living a purposeful life.
Yeah, we're kind of searching for that universal toolkit, aren't we? And the focus really is on that critical connection point.
Yeah.
Let's call it the inner strength, the character, the mindset you need inside to actually fuel significant impact on the outside, whether that's through speaking, writing, or just, action.
That feels like the crucial distinction, doesn't it? You look at great speakers or people who've achieved a lot, and it's easy to think it's just technique or maybe luck. But what seems to connect these ancient masters and the modern thought leaders is this agreement that fundamentally external power, the ability to move an audience or even just lead an effective life, it's rooted in the integrity and the clarity of your inner game.
Exactly. So we're kind of setting the stage by looking at how these thinkers define not just the rules of speaking well, but maybe the rules of being that actually make the speaking matter in the first place.
Okay, so let's dive into that first part then. The craft of persuasion itself, the ancient view, the structure they put around it. Quintilian, for instance, he defined the highest aim of rhetoric as simply to speak well.
But speaking well for him wasn't just being clear or correct. He emphasized that true eloquence needed to be, and these are his words, rich, beautiful, and commanding. It had to have impact.
Commanding, that's a strong word. Why commanding?
Well, to get that, you have to understand this key distinction the ancients made between dialectic and oratory, or rhetoric. Dialect, if you could say, was for the philosophers, the learned seeking truth among themselves.
All right, like a Socratic dialogue, maybe.
Yeah.
Focused on logic, careful inquiry.
Precisely. It was collaborative, academic, aiming for verifiable truth among people already trained in logic. Think of it as the lab, focused on accuracy.
Okay, so dialectic is the lab. What's oratory then?
Oratory is the public square, the courtroom. It's designed for a general audience, an audience that, frankly, often doesn't know or care about the fine points of dialectic.
So the rules have to be different.
Completely. Quintilian notes the orator can't just present facts. You have to, and again, quoting him, attract them by the charm of our discourse or drag them by its force, and occasionally throw them off their balance by an appeal to their emotions.
Drag them by force, throw them off balance. It sounds almost aggressive.
It highlights the active role of the orator. You're not just informing, you're moving, persuading, sometimes even unsettling the audience to get them to a decision or action.
And that distinction, that focus on effect over pure truth, that's what really bothered someone like Plato, right? In the Gorgias.
Oh, absolutely. Socrates famously critiques oratory there, saying it's not a true technique, not a genuine art or craft based on rational principles. He kind of dismisses it as mere imperia.
Imperia.
What's that? Like a knack, a rule of thumb, something you pick up from experience but without deep understanding. Plato argued it's only concerned with creating belief, making people feel good, giving them pleasure, but it lacks true knowledge.
So for Plato, rhetoric risks just being pandering, telling people what they want to hear.
Exactly. His worry was, if a speaker just gratifies the audience, are they actually improving the citizens or just flattering their existing biases and maybe even leading them astray? It's a really serious ethical charge.
It is. So if oratory's goal is belief and action, maybe not pure knowledge, how did the masters, people like Cicero and Quintilian, make sure that belief actually sticks, especially when logic alone might not cut it?
Oh, well, that's where emotion, or pathos as they called it, becomes absolutely essential. Cicero observed something really interesting. He said that short, concise speeches might be good enough to teach a judge the facts of a case.
Okay, logical, clear.
But they absolutely cannot achieve the necessary emotional disruption. He used the word perturbation.
Perturbation, like stirring things up.
Exactly. A disruption of the judge's calm, rational state of mind. As Quintilian put it quite dramatically, moving the audience emotionally is where all things are. That's the whole game.
Wow. So you need more than just facts. You need volume, variety,
Cicero argued for copious and varied oration, yes, designed specifically to, you might say, bypass or overwhelm the purely rational faculty. The goal is to shift the judge or the audience out of that cool, logical headspace and into a state where they're receptive, where they're ready to feel the weight of the argument and act on it.
This is kind of psychological manipulation then, but maybe a necessary one for getting things done in the real world, like in politics or law.
That's certainly how they saw it. It's a powerful recognition of how humans actually work, isn't it? You can know something intellectually,
Yeah.
but until you feel it, really feel it, you often won't change your mind or your behavior.
Which leads us, I suppose, straight to maybe the cornerstone of persuasive authority, something Aristotle pointed out, and Quintilian emphasizes too. The idea that the strongest argument a speaker has is that he is perceived as a good man.
Yes, ethos or character. This is such a fascinating paradox in rhetoric. The sources are really clear. The audience's perception of the speaker's morality, their trustworthiness, might actually be more important than the factual arguments themselves.
More important than the facts. That's likely terrifying.
Well, Quintilian argues that even if the facts are a bit shaky, if the judge truly believes the speaker is virtuous and means well, they're much more likely to side with that person. It becomes about trust.
So does the orator actually have to be good or just seem good? Quintilian must have wrestled with that.
He did. He acknowledges that the semblance of goodness is, quote, but a bad second to the reality. Ideally, the orator is virtuous, but pragmatically, the orator's job is to ensure the audience believes in that virtue because that trust is the ultimate lever for persuasion.
And that perceived character, that ethos, it's not just built on logical arguments, is it?
Yeah.
It's tone, it's pacing.
It's everything. And it even includes, interestingly, the calculated use of something really unpredictable. Humor.
Humor and rhetoric. That seems risky.
Extremely risky, but potentially very effective. Quintilian gives us a surprisingly detailed breakdown of how humor works in oratory. He says it can dispel seriousness, distract from weak points in a case, and maybe most importantly, it provides relief. It wakes up a judge who's getting bored or wearied by the case. It allows them to sort of reset and re-engage.
But it's a double-edged sword, you said.
Absolutely. Quintilian warns that jokes often rely on things that aren't strictly true, or they might be distorted or not very complimentary. Their effect is based purely on immediate, unpredictable emotion, not logic.
So you could easily offend the judge or the audience.
Hugely risky. If a joke falls flat, or if it seems insensitive or out of place, it can completely backfire and destroy the speaker's credibility.
Do we have examples of orators struggling with this?
We do. Quintilian mentions that the great Greek orator, Demosthenes, was apparently thought to be deficient in humor, maybe just didn't have the knack for it.
Okay.
But then you have Cicero, the Roman giant, who was considered by some to be unduly addicted to jokes, both in court and out.
Addicted to jokes. That sounds like a modern critique almost.
It does. Quintilian actually defends Cicero's wit, calling it remarkable, but he does kind of wish that the person who collected Cicero's jokes had used more judgment in selecting than zeal in collecting them.
Implying some were maybe crude or just didn't land.
Exactly. Or they were ill-timed. It really underscores the incredible level of control and judgment required. It's not just about being funny, it's about managing the entire emotional atmosphere of the situation.
Which seems to bring us back to that idea of emotional control, especially with the really strong emotions. What about things like trying to make an audience cry?
Yes. The peril of pathos taken to the extreme. Quintilian is very clear on this. Attempting to move an audience to tears, he says, is incredibly powerful if you succeed.
But if you fail?
If you fail, the result isn't just indifference. It's often the exact opposite of what you intended. Anticlimax, which frequently leads to laughter and ridicule.
Laughter. Why laughter?
Because the audience feels the manipulation. They see the failed attempt at manufacturing grief, and it's so jarring, so artificial, that they react with derision, not compassion. It's like watching bad acting.
So the stakes are incredibly high. It's all or nothing.
Pretty much. Quintilian warns that the speaker must measure and make a careful estimate of his powers. He says there's no intermediate ground between tears and laughter. You nail it, or you crash and burn.
Wow. That tension needing intense emotion but having to manage it with absolute precision that really defines the orator's challenge. And it loops back to character, doesn't it? If the strongest argument is being seen as a good man, then your emotional display has to feel completely authentic, even if it's carefully planned.
Exactly. The perception of authenticity is paramount.
Okay, so if external influence, persuading others, relies so heavily on this perception of good character, this ethos. How do we actually bridge that gap? How do we move from just seeming good to being good, cultivating that inner engine of integrity?
Right. That's the shift, isn't it? From the public performance of rhetoric to the private cultivation of the self. And this takes us nicely from ancient Rome into some more modern wisdom, starting with maybe the bedrock, having a defined purpose.
And who better to start with there than Earl Nightingale and his famous recording, The Strangest Secret?
That's a classic. And its core message is surprisingly simple, almost deceptively so. We literally become what we think about most of the time.
He uses that great analogy of the ship, right?
He does. A ship that leaves harbor with a clear destination, a captain in charge, a map, it will almost certainly reach its port. Maybe it hits storms, maybe it gets delayed, but the destination pulls it forward.
Whereas a ship with no destination.
It's just adrift, subject to every current, every wind. Nightingale says it's doomed to eventually sink or just end up a derelict on some forgotten beach. It has no guiding force.
It's such a clear distinction. People with positive, concrete goals tend to succeed because they're focused. People without goals just drift.
And Nightingale makes a really bold claim. He says, the moment you genuinely decide on a positive, worthwhile goal, you are already successful.
Already, how does that work?
Because, he argues, you've just joined the top 5% of people, the tiny fraction, who actually know where they're going. The psychological mechanism seems to be that defining the where automatically starts filtering your perception for the how.
So you don't need the whole plan mapped out from day one.
Not necessarily. The clarity of the destination itself begins to illuminate opportunities, resources, connections that you simply wouldn't have noticed before when you were aimless. Your brain starts working for you in a directed way.
And that clarity of purpose for Nightingale isn't just about personal gain, is it? It's tied to something bigger.
Absolutely. It's intrinsically linked to service through what he calls the law of mutual exchange. He's very clear. True prosperity, lasting success, is fundamentally built on serving others.
So money, income, rewards. They're just a measurement.
Exactly. A yardstick, he calls it, measuring the quality and the quantity of the service you render to others. His philosophy is uncompromising on this. You cannot genuinely enrich yourself long-term by diminishing or taking from others. Your success has to be a reflection of the value you create in the world.
That focus on service and building that internal clarity, that seems to lead perfectly into the ideas of taking control, or what Stephen Covey famously termed proactivity.
Yes, Covey takes that internal focus and gives it very practical steps. For him, building genuine inner integrity, that foundation of character, start small. It starts with making a small promise to yourself and keeping it.
Just a small one. Why small?
Because it builds trust in yourself. It proves you can rely on your own word. Each kept promise strengthens that inner core of integrity. It's like building muscle.
And this leads to his concept of the circle of influence versus the circle of concern.
Precisely. Proactivity, for Covey, is the essence of living responsibly. He challenges us with that 30-day test. For 1 month, work only within your circle of influence. Meaning, focus exclusively on the things you actually have control over. Your attitude, your choices, your actions, your responses. Don't waste energy complaining about, worrying about, or trying to change things in your wider circle of concern. The economy, politics, other people's behavior, things you can't directly control.
Be a model, not a critic, was his phrase, I think.
That's it. Be a light, not a judge. Focus entirely on improving the one thing you have absolute power over, yourself. His ultimate command is simple: work on you, on be.
That intense focus on internal power, on what you control.
That feels very stoic, doesn't it?
Deeply stoic. And that brings us very naturally to Ryan Holiday's exploration of what he calls true will, drawing heavily on Stoic philosophy.
How does Holiday define true will? It's not just willpower, is it? No, it's quite different from the common idea of the will to win or forcing your way through things externally. True will, in this Stoic sense, is an internal power, something completely unaffected by the outside world.
Unaffected? How is that possible?
Because it involves qualities like quiet humility, resilience, flexibility, and maybe the hardest one, acceptance of what you cannot change.
Acceptance sounds passive, though. Doesn't will imply struggle?
It's the difference between fighting reality futilely and yielding to it strategically so you can act where you do have leverage. True will isn't about changing the external event. It's about mastering your internal response to it.
So when things go wrong, things outside your circle of influence.
True will allows you to turn those unchangeable, often negative situations into opportunities. Opportunities for learning, for growth, for practicing virtue, or even just for providing comfort to others or yourself. You can't control the storm, but you absolutely control how you sail the ship through it. It's a profound shift from demanding external control to mastering internal surrender and response.
That idea of accepting present reality and finding potential within it, that mirrors Russell H. Conwell's core message in Acres of Diamonds, doesn't it?
It really does. Conwell's whole philosophy boils down to this. Great opportunities, vast riches are usually right here, right under your nose, in your current circumstances, your community, your job.
We're often conditioned to think success is out there somewhere else.
Right.
A different city, a different career.
Exactly. And Conwell's famous story illustrates the danger of that perfectly. The story of the man, Ali Hafed, who sells his farm to travel the world searching for diamond mines.
Right. He sells it for, what was it, a small sum?
A modest sum, yes. He spends years searching, finds nothing, and eventually dies penniless and broken.
And the punchline.
The man who bought his farm discovers, right there on the property, the Golconda diamond mines, some of the richest the world has ever known. The original owner had literally been walking over acres of diamonds every day without recognizing their value.
He'd apparently even unknowingly dammed back a stream filled with potential wealth coal oil in one version of the story for decades.
Yes, the details vary, but the message is consistent. The greatest fortune was right there, overlooked because he was focused on finding it somewhere else.
It's a powerful cautionary tale against impatience and against that failure to see and cultivate the potential that's immediately around you.
And Conwell himself seemed to live this philosophy of immediate service and dedication. The sources mention his incredible unselfishness, acting as a guardian for dozens of children at one point.
And his dedication to his lectures, to his audience, was apparently legendary.
There's that incredible story, isn't there? Rushing to give a lecture, he sees a horse bolting, endangering two women. He jumps in, stops the horse, gets injured himself.
Goes to the hospital, but then insists on going to the lecture hall.
Yes. Goes straight from the hospital to the platform, apparently lectures brilliantly for 2 hours, completely forgetting his own pain because he was so focused on serving the audience, on delivering his message.
And the source notes he later barely remembered the heroic part, just saw the lecture as his task and a duty.
It shows where his focus was. On the service, on the immediate responsibility, not on personal glory or even personal suffering. Deeply committed to the here and now.
That level of commitment, that authenticity, and the focus on connection, it links directly to Brené Brown's research, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Brown's work provides the psychological underpinning for why connection is so vital. She states it unequivocally. Connection is why we're here. It's fundamental to our neurobiology. We are wired for it.
And if connection is so fundamental, then the fear of disconnection, that must be incredibly powerful too.
That's the core of her work on shame. Shame, she argues, is essentially the fear of disconnection, the fear that something we've done or failed to do or something about who we are makes us unworthy of connection.
So if we want to be authentic, influential, connected, we have to deal with shame. Shame resilience, she calls it.
Exactly. And it's not about eliminating shame or self-doubt. That's impossible. Resilience is about learning to recognize shame, move through it, and not let it shut you down.
She has that great line about artists or anyone doing creative or vulnerable work.
Right. That they aren't people without doubt. They're simply people who've learned to live with the doubt, to tolerate the vulnerability, and do the work anyway. It's like building tolerance. She jokingly calls it gremlin ninja warrior training.
You have to acknowledge the gremlins, the vulnerability, to actually perform effectively and authentically. You can't pretend they're not there.
Pretending just gives them more power. Authenticity requires embracing that vulnerability.
And maybe the ultimate synthesis of this inner strength, purpose, and responsibility comes from Viktor Frankl, whom Covey references. Frankl's experience in the concentration camps gave him a unique perspective.
A profound one. Frankl observed that we don't just invent our missions in life out of thin air. Rather, we detect them. Life itself asks questions of us.
How do we answer those questions?
By being responsible, Frankl said. Responsible for our own unique existence, for the tasks life sets before us. It's about listening to our conscience, recognizing our specific talents and opportunities, and understanding the obligations that arise from our unique situation.
So detecting purpose is different from just inventing it.
Crucially different. Inventing purpose can be arbitrary, maybe driven by ego or external pressures. Detecting purpose implies a deeper listening, a recognition of something already present, a call waiting to be answered. It's the highest form of proactivity Covey talks about. choosing your response, your meaning, even in the face of suffering or unchangeable circumstances.
And that awareness, that detected purpose, that becomes the ultimate inner compass guiding your external actions.
Precisely. It provides the why that allows you to endure almost anyhow, as Nietzsche via Frankl might put it. That's the inner engine fully engaged.
Okay, so we've built this picture of the cultivated inner self-purpose, proactivity, resilience, responsibility. Now let's look at how that inner strength translates into actual public discourse, often under immense pressure. These examples feel like masterclasses.
They really are. Starting with someone like Sojourner Truth. Her power seems almost effortless, but it was deeply strategic.
What was her genius, do you think?
I'd say two things. First, her absolute unvarnished authenticity, it just radiated from her. That built her ethos, her credibility instantly. People felt they were hearing raw truth.
And the second thing?
Her piercing strategic clarity. She wasn't just making a general plea for equality. She was dissecting the specific dangers of a partial victory.
You mean her famous argument about suffrage for colored men but not colored women?
Exactly. She stated it so plainly. If colored men get rights but colored women don't, then the colored men will be masters over the women and it will be just as bad as it was before.
That's brilliant rhetoric. She's not just asking for her rights, she's forecasting a future oppression created by the very allies she's addressing.
It's incredibly powerful. And she delivered these profound arguments using simple, memorable language, personal stories, and just her sheer force of personality.
Like embracing nicknames given to her, or mentioning that she smokes.
Right. Referring to being called Mrs. Stowe's Libyan Sybil as respectable compared to the alternative slur, or ending a speech by declaring, "Sojourner smokes!" It's the ultimate display of, this is who I am, take it or leave it. Utterly authentic, refusing to hide any part of herself. Powerful.
That use of personality, wit, even irony as a tool of resistance.
Yeah.
We see that elsewhere too, like with Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman's arrest.
Oh, yes. Their account of their arrest for anti-conscription activities is a masterclass in using rhetorical irony to expose the absurdity of state power.
How do they do that?
They frame the whole thing as a performance, a circus staged purely for the arresting officer, Marshall McCarthy, to gain some immortality. They immediately trivialize the state's action.
And the core of the irony was the visual contrast they painted, right?
Absolutely brilliant. They force the reader to picture it. Imagine a dozen stalwart warriors rushing up to find the two defendants, quietly seated at their desks.
Wielding not the gun or the bomb.
But only such a simple and insignificant thing as a pen. The juxtaposition is devastating.
Right.
Huge, paranoid state force, stalwart warriors, versus the quiet intellectual activity, a simple pen. It makes the entire legal action look like a ridiculous overreaction, a paranoid fantasy.
They're appealing directly to the audience's sense of absurdity to discredit the state. The real weapon wasn't violence, it was ideas.
It's pure rhetorical judo, using the opponent's weight and momentum against them. And we see another, maybe more serious form of this kind of rhetorical maneuvering in Malcolm X's evolution, especially after his pilgrimage to Mecca.
His perspective clearly shifted dramatically. That internal change was reflected in his public statements.
Profoundly. He moved away from the earlier blanket condemnations. He started saying things like he believed whites are human beings, a huge shift, as long as this is borne out by their humane attitude toward Negroes.
So he's setting a new standard. Shared humanity, demonstrated through humane action, rather than just race.
Exactly. He redefined the criteria for potential alliance and understanding, and this is where his rhetoric becomes incredibly adept at defense and redefinition, particularly how he handled being called a demagogue.
Right, that label was clearly meant to discredit him, paint him as an irresponsible rabble-rouser.
And instead of just rejecting the label, he completely neutralized it by essentially hijacking its meaning.
How did you do that?
He embraced it, but on his own terms. He pointed to history, citing figures like Socrates, Jesus Christ, Gandhi as examples of demagogues.
Whoa, equating himself with them.
Not just equating, but explaining to the reporters that the original meaning of demagogue was simply teacher of the people. So, by accepting the label but redefining it through historical precedent, he turned an intended insult into an honorific. He placed himself in a lineage of profound, often persecuted truth-tellers who challenged the status quo.
That's incredibly skillful, taking the weapon aimed at him and turning it into a shield, or even a badge of honor.
It's the ultimate move of controlling the narrative, controlling the definition of the terms. He refused to let his opponents define him or his mission. He deeply believed that only raw, naked truth exchanged between black and white could clear the air of all the racial mirages, cliches, and lies. That conviction, that internal clarity forged through experience, gave him the rhetorical courage to do that.
It seems like all these examples require immense courage, fueled by that inner conviction. Which brings us to J.K. Rowling's commencement speech, which really synthesizes that inner courage with the external responsibility, especially for those with privilege.
Yes, she speaks very directly to graduates about the moral obligation that comes with their position. She calls them lucky people.
Lucky because they got an education others couldn't.
Precisely. She emphasizes that they stand in place of others, past and present, people who didn't get that chance, maybe due to poverty or circumstance, and that luck, that privilege, isn't just something to enjoy, it confers a duty.
A duty to act, to use that education for more than just personal gain.
That's the core of it, a duty to engage with the world, to use their influence, their talents. And the biggest obstacle she identifies to fulfilling that duty—
Fear.
fear. Fear, she says, tamps down our authentic selves. It makes us cautious, calculating. It turns us into a patchwork collection of affectations and expectations, trying to please everyone, trying to avoid failure.
It pushes us towards the safe option.
And her warning echoes the Stoics, echoes Nightingale, echoes Covey.
Yeah.
The safe path is often the enemy of the satisfying. She urges graduates not to let fear rule them, not to give up adventure and purpose for mere safety, because that kind of deferred living can become permanent. The ultimate responsible action is choosing purpose over comfort, even when it's scary.
So we've journeyed from the techniques of Roman courtrooms all the way to the existential choices facing graduates today. Looking back across all these sources, what's the big takeaway? What really connects Quintilian to Covey to Sojourner Truth?
I think the most profound thread is that total interdependency of the inner and the outer game. You really can't separate them. Effective influence, whether it's persuading a judge or inspiring a movement or just living a successful life, seems deeply rooted in cultivated character.
We saw the how-to of that inner cultivation, didn't we? Covey and Nightingale showing us the mechanics. Define your purpose. Keep small promises. Build integrity brick by brick. Seneca, via Holiday, showing us the resilience needed, that inner fortress of will.
And then we saw the external application. Quintilian and Cicero detailing the techniques, the emotional calculus needed to move an audience, but also figures like Truth and Malcolm X demonstrating how raw authenticity and courageous redefinition can be just as, if not more, powerful than formal rhetoric.
The two threads are woven together. You need the internal focus of the learner, constantly working on yourself,
to effectively fuel the external application of the orator, the person who acts and communicates in the world. Maybe ultimately you have to genuinely be the good person before you can convincingly and ethically play the good person in public life. The semblance can only take you so far.
That journey through influence, mindset, and action leads us to a really interesting final thought, a provocative idea from the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's about how we actually grow as individuals, the concept of the complex self.
Right. Csikszentmihalyi, famous for his work on flow, suggested that real psychological growth, becoming a more complex and capable person, isn't just about moving in one direction. It actually comes from balancing two opposite psychological tendencies.
Opposite tendencies, what are they?
The first one he calls differentiation. This is the drive towards uniqueness, towards autonomy. It's about developing your individual talents, skills, and perspectives, separating yourself from the crowd, carving out your own distinct identity.
Okay, becoming more unique, more individual. What's the opposite?
The opposite tendency is integration. This is the drive towards union, towards connection. It's about belonging, connecting with other people, engaging with ideas, causes, communities, entities larger than your individual self. It's about being part of something bigger.
So differentiation pulls you towards being unique, and integration pulls you towards belonging. They seem inherently in tension.
They are, and Csikszentmihalyi's point is that a truly complex, fully realized, growing self is one that manages to successfully combine both of these opposing forces simultaneously.
What happens if you only do one?
Well, if you only focus on differentiation, you might become highly skilled, unique, maybe even brilliant, but you risk becoming isolated, disconnected, maybe eccentric in a non-productive way.
And if you only focus on integration?
You might be very connected, very much part of the group, but you risk losing your unique voice, your individual perspective. You might just become a follower, blending in completely without contributing your distinct value.
So genuine growth requires constantly navigating that tension. You need to develop your unique self and deepen your connection to the larger community, the shared human project.
That seems to be the idea. You need both the roots of integration and the wings of differentiation to truly flourish. Which leads to a final question, really, for you listening.
Thinking about your own life right now, your own growth, which of these two paths presents the greater challenge for you? Is it differentiation, carving out your unique path, developing your distinct voice and talents? Or is it integration, deepening your connections, finding your place within the larger community, contributing to a shared purpose?
Where does your growing edge lie? That internal balancing act, that negotiation between uniqueness and connection, might just be the fundamental challenge that determines the reach and impact of your external life.
We've explored the tools, the principles drawn from centuries of wisdom.
Indeed. Now, as always, the real work, the construction of the self, begins.
Thank you for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.